Dr. Elliot Harrow stepped off his shuttle onto the barren plains of Zia, his boots crunching against the dry, crystalline soil. The planet, once a jewel in the galactic crown, was now a forgotten wasteland, its glory days buried beneath layers of neglect. The mission briefing he'd received from the Interstellar Health Corps had been vague, only mentioning a dire situation involving the planet's ruler. What he didn't expect was the eerie emptiness that greeted him. No welcoming party, no signs of life. As he made his way to the crumbling royal palace, his comms crackled to life. "Doctor, Harrow, you've reached the target zone. Be cautious. Reports indicate severe neglect and possible contamination." "Understood," Elliot replied, his tone clipped. The closer he got to the palace, the more unsettling the silence became. Its once magnificent spires now leaned at precarious angles, their surfaces dulled by years of decay. The grand doors groaned as they opened, revealing a dimly lit interior. Inside, he found her, Queen Varks, seated on a throne that seemed more like a prison. Her form was cloaked in tattered silks, her skin mottled and scarred by the advanced stages of a rare alien leprosy. Her once vibrant eyes, now dulled with pain and resignation, flicked toward him with faint curiosity. "Who are you?" she rasped, her voice carrying the weight of isolation. "I'm Doctor Elliot Harrow," he said, stepping forward with measured confidence. "I've come to help." Her laugh was dry and bitter. "Help? You're wasting your time, human. Even my people have abandoned me." Elliot knelt before her, meeting her gaze without flinching. "Then it's their loss, because I don't give up on people." For a moment, there was silence. Then, for the first time in years, the Queen allowed herself a flicker of hope. Elliot wasted no time setting up a makeshift medical station in the throne room, the only space that still retained some semblance of order. His scans revealed the devastating progression of the Queen's illness. The alien leprosy had not only ravaged her body, but also drained her of energy and willpower. Yet despite the severity of her condition, Elliot saw something in her, a glimmer of strength beneath the pain. "You're thorough," Varks commented dryly as he worked, her voice laced with skepticism. "But I've had healers before, none stayed long." "I'm not them," Elliot replied, his hand steady as he administered a treatment to ease her pain. "And I didn't come all this way to quit now." Her sharp gaze softened for a moment, but she quickly masked it. "Do you even know who I am, human? What I've done?" Elliot paused, meeting her eyes. "I've read the reports. They call you a tyrant, a leper queen, a ruler who let her people fall into ruin. But I'm here to see the person behind the titles." Her lips quirked in a bitter smile. "A bold statement. And what do you see?" "I see someone who's still here," Elliot said simply, "and that means there's something worth fighting for." Varks looked away, the weight of his words settling over her. For so long she had been defined by her illness and the abandonment of her people. Now, here was someone who saw her as more than a dying relic. As Elliot continued his work, he began to notice the details others had likely ignored. The careful way Varks spoke, her sharp mind undulled by her physical suffering. Though she dismissed herself as a lost cause, Elliot saw the remnants of a ruler who had once commanded respect and loyalty. That night, as he prepared to rest, he found her watching him from her throne. "Why are you really here, Doctor?" "Harrow?" He met her gaze without hesitation. "Because everyone deserves someone to fight for them, even a queen who thinks she's been forgotten." Her expression shifted, and for a fleeting moment Elliot thought he saw gratitude in her weary eyes. Elliot awoke to the faint sound of wind howling through the cracks in the palace walls. The throne room, once a beacon of vibrant grandeur, now felt more like a tomb. Dust floated in the pale light filtering through broken stained glass windows, painting the room in muted colours. Varks sat in her throne as she always did, her frail figure wrapped in layers of tattered fabric. Despite her weakened state, she held herself with a regal dignity. Elliot approached with his medkit in hand. "How long have you been like this?" he asked gently, applying a salve to the lesions on her arm. She glanced at him, her voice sharp yet tinged with melancholy. "Long enough to know what abandonment feels like." Elliot paused, meeting her gaze. "I'm here." "Now, and why should I trust you?" she asked, her tone challenging but not hostile. "Because I don't have a reason to betray you," Elliot said simply. "I'm not your subject, not your court. I'm just a medic trying to help." Her lips quirked in a faint, bitter smile. "A human, of all beings, showing me compassion? It's almost laughable." Elliot leaned back, studying her. "You don't think you deserve it." "Does anyone truly deserve anything?" she countered, her eyes narrowing. "My people abandoned me because I failed them. My illness only gave them an excuse to forget me." Elliot's hand stilled. "You didn't choose this. You didn't ask for it. What matters is what you do now." Varks fell silent, her gaze distant. For the first time, Elliot saw the cracks in her stoic facade, a flicker of vulnerability beneath the bitterness. Determined to lift Varks from the depths of her despair, Elliot turned his attention to the palace grounds. Beneath layers of ash and debris lay the remnants of what had once been lush gardens, famed throughout the galaxy for their beauty. The sight of the overgrown ruins gave him an idea. He returned to Varks, a determined gleam in his eye. "We're going to restore your gardens." She looked at him as though he had suggested they move a mountain. "Why? The flowers are long dead, just like this empire." "Not entirely," Elliot replied, holding up a small, pale seed he'd found buried in the dirt. "Life has a way of surviving, even in the harshest conditions. And so do you." Reluctantly, Varks allowed herself to be coaxed into the gardens. With Elliot's help, she leaned on a cane as she took her first steps outside the palace in years. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the faint scent of forgotten flora. Elliot began clearing the rubble and planting the seeds he'd gathered, his movements steady and methodical. Varks watched him with quiet curiosity, occasionally offering sharp but insightful suggestions. "You know a lot about these plants," Elliot remarked, brushing dirt from his hands. "I tended to them myself once," she admitted, her voice soft, "before all of this." "Then you can help me bring them back," Elliot said, his tone encouraging. Varks hesitated, but eventually nodded. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of purpose. Together, they worked to revive the gardens, their efforts slow but steady. Varks, though limited by her illness, guided Elliot with her knowledge, her voice regaining a hint of its former authority. As the first buds began to bloom, Elliot caught a rare glimpse of a genuine smile on Varks's face. "You're stubborn, Doctor Harrow," she said, her tone lighter than he'd ever heard it. "Perhaps that's exactly what I needed." "And you're stronger than you think, Your Majesty," Elliot replied. "Perhaps that's exactly what your people need." The Queen's smile lingered as she looked out over the slowly reviving garden. For the first time in years, she felt the faintest glimmer of hope. The revival of the palace gardens marked a turning point for both Elliot and Varks. The Queen, though still frail, began spending more time outside, her voice growing stronger as she shared her knowledge of the flora and the history woven into the palace grounds. For the first time in years, she was beginning to feel like a ruler again, even if only in her own small corner of the world. One day, as Elliot cleared debris near the overgrown fountain at the garden centre, his shovel struck something solid. Curious, he dug deeper, uncovering a weathered metal box sealed tightly. Varks, observing from her seat nearby, leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "That belonged to my ancestors," she said, her voice low but tinged with awe. Elliot wiped the dirt from the box's surface and opened it carefully. Inside were scrolls and crystalline data rods, their inscriptions glowing faintly. Varx's hands trembled as she took one of the scrolls, her fingers tracing the ornate symbols. "These are records of the early monarchy," she explained. "They were thought lost during the Great Uprising." Elliot examined one of the data rods. "If these records are as important as they look, they could be a way to reconnect you to your people's past and their loyalty." Varx's gaze lingered on the scrolls. "Or they could see them as relics of a forgotten queen." "Then we'll make them see otherwise," Elliot said firmly. "Your story isn't over yet." The discovery of the box breathed new energy into Varx. Over the following days, she worked with Elliot to decipher the records, her mind sharp despite her physical limitations. The documents detailed the founding principles of the Xi'an monarchy, values of unity, resilience, and stewardship that had long been overshadowed by centuries of corruption and fear. "This is what they had forgotten," Varx said one evening, her voice heavy with both sadness and determination. These principles were what once made Xia strong. Elliot leaned forward, his tone encouraging. "Then let's remind them. We can use this as the foundation to rebuild what's been lost." Varx looked at him, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "You truly believe this can work?" "I do," Elliot replied, "because I believe in you." As word of the garden's revival spread, a few of Varx's former subjects began to return, drawn by whispers of the Queen's renewed presence. At first, they came in secret, hesitant and wary. But when they saw her walking among the blooming flowers, guided by the human medic, their fear began to fade. One such visitor, a middle-aged Xi'an named Kalos, approached Varx hesitantly. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing low, "I never thought I'd see you again." Varx regarded him with a mix of surprise and warmth. "You've returned, Kalos. Why?" "The gardens," he said simply. "They remind me of what Xia once was, and of what it could be again." Varx exchanged a glance with Elliot, who nodded subtly. "Then help us," she said, her voice steady. "If we are to rebuild, I need my people by my side." Kalos agreed, and soon others followed. They began assisting in the restoration efforts, their presence breathing life back into the palace and its grounds. Varx, once isolated and shunned, found herself at the centre of a growing community, a symbol of hope for those who had lost faith. However, not everyone welcomed the Queen's resurgence. Factions that had benefited from her downfall began to conspire, seeing her renewed influence as a threat to their power. One night, as Elliot and Varx reviewed plans for further restoration, a coded message arrived, a warning from a sympathetic insider. "They're planning to undermine you," Elliot said after decoding the message. "They want to make sure you never regain the throne." Varx's expression hardened. "Then we must act first." Elliot leaned forward, his voice resolute. "We have the records, the gardens, and your people returning. We need to take this momentum and show them you're not just surviving, you're leading." With Elliot's help, Varx prepared a bold declaration. She called for a public gathering at the palace, inviting anyone who still believed in Xia's potential to attend. The announcement spread quickly, sparking both excitement and fear. For Varx, it was a gamble, but one she knew she had to take. On the day of the gathering, the restored gardens were filled with citizens, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Varx, dressed in a simple but elegant gown, stepped forward with Elliot by her side. She stood taller than she had in years, her voice clear as she addressed the crowd. "My people," she began, "I have made many mistakes, and I have paid dearly for them. But Xia's future does not have to remain in the shadows of its past. Together, we can restore what was lost and build something greater." The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement. Elliot, standing just behind her, added, "Your queen has fought harder than anyone to return to this moment. She has faced abandonment, illness, and despair. but she has never given up on you. Now, she's asking you to stand with her." The response was hesitant at first, but as Vax continued to speak, her sincerity and passion broke through the crowd's doubt. By the end of her speech, applause rippled through the garden, the first step toward a united Zia. For the first time, Vax felt like a queen again, not because of her title, but because of her people's trust. The gathering in the gardens marked a turning point for Vax and her people. Word of her speech spread far and wide, rekindling interest in the fate of the abandoned queen. More citizens began returning to the palace, not out of duty, but out of curiosity, and a faint hope that the queen they had once feared might be someone they could follow again. Vax, with Elliot by her side, took an active role in overseeing the restoration of her palace and its grounds. The gardens, now thriving with life, became a symbol of rebirth and resilience. Each new bloom seemed to echo the growing sense of hope among her people. One afternoon, while supervising the reconstruction of the palace gates, Vax noticed a group of children peeking through the cracks in the walls. She approached them carefully, her once intimidating presence softened by her illness and newfound humility. "Are you not afraid of me?" she asked gently. The oldest child, a boy with striking green eyes, shook his head. "They say you're different now, that you care about us." Vax knelt slowly, meeting his gaze. "I do. I only wish I had shown it sooner." The boy hesitated before stepping closer. "My father says you're trying to make things better. Is that true?" "It is," she replied, her voice steady. "But I cannot do it alone. Will you help me?" The boy nodded, and the children followed him through the gates, their laughter filling the air. For Vax, it was a moment of profound change. She had not just regained the trust of her people, she had earned it. Meanwhile, Elliot worked tirelessly to ensure the Queen's message reached beyond the palace walls. Using his connections within the Interstellar Health Corp, he coordinated shipments of medical supplies and food to the outlying settlements of Zia, earning goodwill from even the most skeptical citizens. One evening, as they reviewed progress in the palace library, Vax turned to Elliot. "You've done more for my people in a few months than I managed in years." Elliot smiled. "I think they just needed to see what you're capable of when you're given a chance." Her gaze softened. "And I needed to see it too. Thank you, Elliot." As the Queen's influence grew, so too did the unease among those who had profited from her downfall. Powerful nobles and former advisers who had abandoned her during her illness now saw her resurgence as a threat to their control. Among them was Lord Crick, a cunning and ambitious figure who had long coveted the throne. Crick convened a secret meeting with his allies in the shadows of the capital's abandoned council chamber. "This revival of hers is dangerous," he declared, his tone sharp. "If she consolidates her power, we will lose everything." One of his cohorts, a nervous but opportunistic merchant, replied, "Her people seem to believe in her again. They've even welcomed that human." Crick's expression darkened. "Then we must remind them why she was abandoned in the first place." Unaware of the brewing conspiracy, Vax and Elliot continued their work. However, Elliot's instincts, as both a medic and a soldier, told him something was amiss. Reports of sabotage began filtering in. Supplies stolen, rumours spread to sow doubt, and even an attempt to poison the palace's water supply. "This isn't random," Elliot said one night as he and Vax reviewed the reports. "Someone is trying to destabilise you." Vax frowned, her expression hardening. "Crick. He was one of the first to leave when I fell ill. He's always seen me as weak." "Well, he's about to find out how wrong he is," Elliot said. "We need to act before he gains more support." Elliot worked with Vax's loyal guards to tighten security around the palace and investigate the sabotage. Meanwhile, Vax called another public gathering, this time to address the growing unrest directly. Standing before her people in the gardens, Vax spoke with a calm authority. There are those who seek to divide us, who thrive on fear and mistrust. But I will not let them take away what we have rebuilt together. This is our home, our future, and we will defend it. The crowd erupted into applause, their loyalty to her solidifying. Eliot, watching from the sidelines, felt a surge of pride. The Queen he had met months ago, frail, isolated and resigned, was now a leader reborn. As the gathering dispersed, Vox approached Eliot. "Do you think they believe in me?" He smiled. "I think they already do. Now we just need to make sure Crick and his kind can't undo it." Together, they prepared for the challenges ahead, their bond stronger than ever as they faced the looming storm. Crick's conspiracy reached its peak as he launched a coordinated attack against the palace under the cover of night. His loyalists infiltrated the city, spreading fear and chaos. Fires burned in the outer districts, and false rumours spread like wildfire. That Queen Vox's illness had returned, that Eliot was manipulating her, and that she was unfit to lead. Eliot woke to the sound. The sound of explosions and alarms filled the air. The palace guards scrambled to defend their queen, but the attacks were widespread and deliberate. Rushing to Vox's chambers, Eliot found her already dressed, her cane in hand, and her gaze steely. "They're making their move," Eliot said, breathless but composed. "Crick's forces are in the city." Vox nodded, her voice calm. "Then we confront them head-on. I will not hide." Despite Eliot's protests, Vox insisted on addressing her people. Together they made their way to the palace balcony overlooking the city. Fires lit the night sky, and the sounds of battle echoed in the distance. "My people," Vox's voice rang out, amplified by the palace's ancient communication systems. "Do not let fear consume you. This is the work of those who seek to divide us, to destroy the unity we have rebuilt. Stand with me, and we will drive out those who wish to drag us back into darkness." Her words, filled with passion and strength, rallied the loyal citizens. Groups of civilians joined the guards to push back the rebels, their belief in Vox stronger than the lies Crick had spread. In the midst of the chaos, Eliot led a small team of loyal guards to Crick's hideout in the city's ruins. The confrontation was brutal, Crick's men fighting with desperation. Eliot's training as a soldier shone through as he outmaneuvered them, his tactical mind and precision giving him the upper hand. When he finally confronted Crick, the traitor sneered. "You think this changes anything, human? The people will never truly follow her." Eliot's expression was cold. "You're wrong. They already do." With a swift move, Eliot disarmed Crick and handed him over to the guards. "Take him to the dungeons. His rebellion ends tonight." The dawn broke over Zia, painting the sky in hues of gold and violet. The fires had been extinguished, the rebels subdued, and the city began to stir with cautious hope. Eliot and Vox stood on the palace balcony, overlooking the aftermath of the battle. "You saved us," Vox said, her voice soft but resolute. "No," Eliot replied, "we saved each other, and your people saved themselves by believing in you." As the day unfolded, Vox called for a public assembly in the gardens. Hundreds gathered, their faces reflecting the trials of the night, but also a renewed sense of unity. Vox, dressed in the regal colours of her house, addressed them with a strength that belied her frail body. "Last night we were tested," she began. "But together we proved that Zia's spirit is not so easily broken. We are stronger than the forces that seek to divide us, and together we will build a future worthy of our ancestors." The crowd erupted into cheers, their faith in their queen solidified. Eliot watched from the sidelines, his heart swelling with pride. She was no longer the abandoned ruler he had met months ago. She was a queen reborn. As the weeks turned into months, Zia began to thrive once more. The gardens became a symbol of hope, drawing visitors from across the galaxy. The ancient records Elliot and Varks had unearthed became the foundation for a new system of governance, one that valued collaboration and transparency. Elliot chose to remain on Zia, not as an outsider, but as part of its rebirth. He established a medical clinic in the city, ensuring that no one would face the neglect Varks had endured. One evening, as they walked through the blooming gardens, Varks turned to Elliot. "You've given me more than my health, Elliot. You've given me a reason to hope." He smiled, his gaze steady. "And you've shown me what true resilience looks like. It's been an honor to stand by your side." As they stood beneath the twin moons, the sounds of laughter and life filling the air, they knew that their journey, one of redemption, resilience, and unity, had transformed not just their lives, but the future of Zia itself. Together, they had forged a legacy that would inspire generations to come.